Syria's neighbours frequently close the borders to avoid a spillover of the conflict. It means people attempting to flee the violence are trapped inside, but it also means vital aid supplies, including food, clothing and medicine, can't get in. In Turkey's southern border town of Antakya, Syrian refugees have found work at a bakery. Hassan al-Ghaddoud spends his day making bread at this factory, run by the charity IHH. It's a chance to do something to earn a small living for himself, while helping his fellow countrymen who remain inside Syria.
بسبب الظروف الصعبة هي اللي وصلتنا إلى هنا. يعني وبحثت حول أمن عائلتي ولحتى أكفي دراستي.
About a dozen workers like Hassan work here. Industrial machinery helps to make over 1,000 packets of bread here every day, which can be distributed to refugees. But it's nowhere near enough.
There is a severe shortage of food across Syria. The United Nations says that though it has helped many people, 1 million others remain without any food aid whatsoever.
Embattled parts of the capital, Damascus, remain out of reach and have been for several months now. More children are admitted to hospital for malnutrition treatment in the capital than in any other part of the country. It may go to explain why a group of clerics issued a ruling last month to allow people living in the besieged Damascus suburbs to eat meat that's normally forbidden in Islam. Cats, dogs and donkeys were permitted to stave off hunger. The clerics called it a cry for help to the whole world, adding a chilling statement that unless there was change for the better, the living would have to start eating the dead. Aid agencies have long urged the Syrian government to allow humanitarian supplies to enter the area, where they say many residents are still trapped. They called on the world to prioritise food and aid to areas under attack as the programme to dismantle Syria's chemical weapons arsenal is prioritised. Médecins Sans Frontières, one of the world's leading aid organisations, says it's, quote, an absurd situation when chemical weapons inspectors are able to drive freely through areas in desperate need, while aid convoys are blocked. Every crossing entering Syria that we encountered had queues of trucks, sometimes several miles long, waiting to deliver aid. Frequent closures mean scenes like this are all too common.
This is the Turkish side of the border, and as you can see, trucks are already lining up to deliver aid into Syria. Now, all of the aid that reaches northern Syria comes through Turkey.
It means several million people who are trapped in the north of Syria depend completely on these crossings to be open. Turkey shares a 560-mile border with Syria and says it closes the crossings to avoid violence spilling over into its territory. Turkey's Prime Minister Recep Erdogan is a strong critic of Syrian President Bashar al Asad and a main supporter of the rebels fighting against him. Turkey hosts 1.5 million Syrian refugees. The country's disaster management agencies say around 200,000 of them shelter in camps and container villages set up in various provinces. Nearly 500,000 Syrian refugees live outside these refugee camps. Not far from the border, I meet a doctor who runs a physiotherapy clinic for incoming Syrian refugees, men and women who have suffered amputations, paralysis and other injuries as a result of the war. He tells me the most common injuries he treats are spinal cord and brain injuries. All of the patients here are victims of the Syrian conflict.
Spinal cord injury under the lumbar.
In a week, how many do you see?
About each week. We have about 4 or 3 patients each week, or 5 patients, unfortunately.
And doctor, for you yourself on a personal basis, how does it feel? Because
unfortunately,
you see so many of these cases.
Personal, I am so sad. I am so sad, so sad. And especially, I'm so sad when I told the patient that it's end stage. You can't imagine how I feel when I tell someone that he is in end stage. Really. I can't explain, because the majority of patients are in young and adult people who lose his work, lose his special life. He can't do anything, and he need assistance with everything. can't move, you can't up, down, you can't do nothing. I try to make all what I can for him, but unfortunately we had received many patients with all injury, and we can't do nothing for them, unfortunately.
Along with the physical trauma of war, Syrians and those helping them are faced with post-traumatic stress disorder. The long-term psychological effects of the conflict are yet to be realized, but experts estimate that it's having a profound and disturbing effect, particularly on children. Millions have fled their homes, frequently after witnessing the death of a family member and the destruction of familiar buildings and neighborhoods. Signs of safety and continuity have vanished. For the children that remain inside Syria, they face airstrikes, starvation, and the bitterly cold winter. There is a shortage of trained psychologists to help these children. At a makeshift school in Rayhania, I meet a group of Americans who are here to help.
You find in the downtime, they bring you to the side and they tell you stories. For instance, today, a teacher told me a story of a little girl that was in the first grade making greeting cards. That was my workshop today, making greeting cards. And she's in first grade, and she was in her home when a shell landed in her home, and her mother and her sister were killed. And she lives here with her sister, and her father is not around. And it's a terrible story. Her face has shrapnel scars still on them. But the girl, she was doing her drawings, and you know, she's very quiet, and you talk to her a little bit. You don't talk to her about what's happened, but you just tell her that you care and that you've come from across the world because that you do care, and you just listen.
Lena is an architect. She and her team from the US charity Zaytuna have traveled here for a week to help Syrian children learn about the word return. Origami is the Japanese word for return, and in a cold and dark classroom, a group of about 30 children learn how to fold paper in careful ways to create a paper frog.
It certainly seems a lot more fun here than when I was at school, but it's also a lot colder. The children here are absolutely freezing. The temperatures are really, really low. And this is what it looks like when our camera lights get turned off.
Syria's conflict is fast approaching its third anniversary, but for many of its victims, it's already taken too long. Assad's jets still bully the country's once restive skies, and as long as that continues, chances are rooms like this one will see more young soldiers. Women like Khayriya will lose further loved ones, and rebels like this man will find new and more resilient forces to give loyalty to. We left Syria in its cold and darkness, knowing that tomorrow will be much the same for the war's many victims. Violence may get worse before it gets better. The cold is set to last for several more weeks. And spring? There's no sign of that here.